From surveillance footage to forensic examination, there are so many tools that investigators have today at their disposal. But even with these technologies, not all cases are easy to close. Sometimes it takes a minuscule item of evidence and a keen eye for all the pieces of the puzzle to fit together. Join us in today's episode as we examine 3 instances of observant investigators who helped to crack a seemingly impossible case. Anna Repkina. 26-year-old Anna Repkina believed she'd met her soulmate when she connected with 26-year-old Will Hargrove online. An Oregon native, Hargrove was living in the States but had an interest in all things Russian. After their first online meeting in 2016, their romance blossomed quickly. Over the months, they sent one another thousands of messages, memes, and photographs, and discovered they had a myriad of things in common, not least their taste in music. Completely infatuated with Hargrove, Anna made the decision later that year to fly to the US and spend the holidays with him to see how their relationship would work in person. For 10 days, Anna became deeply involved in Hargrove's life in Oregon. She met his friends, took trips to see the coast, and they even spent the new year together. At the end of her trip, Hargrove proposed, and Anna accepted. She was absolutely elated as she returned to Russia, with plans to move overseas as soon as possible. According to friends, she soon began discussing wedding dresses. But, unbeknownst to Anna, Hargrove had been entertaining another woman. Michelle Chavez was a married mother of 2 in her early 30s, living in Albany, Oregon, when Anna and Hargrove met. While working as a taxi driver, Michelle met Hargrove and took an instant liking to him. Although her own marriage was not abusive, it was certainly loveless, with Michelle claiming that she and her husband shared little more than a bed, and they were more like roommates than romantic partners. Before long, an affair began between the two, and Michelle moved Hargrove into her spare bedroom, although it's unclear if her husband ever knew the true nature of their relationship. Eventually, Michelle decided that she would leave her husband, she just didn't know when. To signify her promise, she gave Hargrove her wedding ring. It was the same one that he would later give to Anna. In March 2017, Anna returned to Oregon so that she and Hargrove could plan their wedding. But Michelle, furious that Hargrove had given the 26-year-old her ring, refused to let her stay in her house, forcing Hargrove and Anna to rent an apartment in Corvallis, a small college a short distance away. Eventually, Anna grew suspicious of Hargrove, though, noting that he would often be out of touch for hours, even though he wasn't at work. Instead, he was spending time with Michelle. Tired of everything, Michelle messaged Anna on Facebook, stating that they were sharing Hargrove, but Hargrove told Anna that Michelle was his crazy ex-girlfriend. Anna opted to ignore Michelle after that, and she and Hargrove continued with their wedding plans. The pair had decided to hire an officiant and get married on the beach, but when they arrived, they discovered that the officiant had not shown up. It would later emerge that Hargrove hadn't organized for an officiant or a marriage license. Saddened but undeterred, Anna believed they could simply reschedule their wedding date. But before that could happen, Michelle gave Hargrove an ultimatum, asking him to choose her or Anna. Anna's body was discovered on a remote logging road in Alsea on April 17, 2017. She had died from a single shotgun blast to the head. She was surrounded by trash, cigarette cartons, and candy wrappers, but in amongst all of that garbage, detectives discovered a KFC receipt pressed up against a clear plastic bag. It showed the date and time of the transaction, and the number of the debit card used was linked to Kevin Thomas, a friend of Will Hargrove's. According to Kevin, the pair ate KFC together every Friday. When questioned further, he volunteered that Hargrove had recently borrowed his shotgun to, quote, blow off some steam. It would later be recovered from the back of Hargrove's vehicle. Hargrove told everyone, including Michelle, that Anna had packed a suitcase and left him, but in reality, he had been the one to brutally murder her. Hargrove took $800 out of Anna's bank accounts afterwards so that he could pay off his car insurance bill. CCTV also showed him purchasing Lego toys and cigars. In the days following Anna's supposed disappearance, Hargrove exhibited strange behaviors. He began researching time travel and asked strangers online for advice about how to travel back in time and correct a horrible mistake, offering to sell his soul. Furthermore, in an attempt to keep up the ruse, he kept messaging Anna, asking her to get in touch, knowing full well she would never respond. After being brought in for questioning, Hargrove admitted to dumping the trash, but claimed he'd dumped it in a different area of town, not where Anna's body had been found. Shortly afterwards, he asked for a lawyer, and he was subsequently arrested for the murder of Anna Repkina. He stood trial in October 2009, with Michelle testifying for the prosecution. She admitted to giving Hargrove an ultimatum, but said that she never wanted Anna to be killed, just for him to break up with her. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, returning a verdict of guilty. Hargrove was given life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. Vicki Lynne Hoskinson. 8-year-old Vicki Lynne Hoskinson was last seen on Monday, September 17, 1984, in Tucson, Arizona. That afternoon, her mother, Debbie Carlson, asked her to take her aunt's birthday card to the post box. Reportedly, this was the first time that Debbie had let Vicki, or any of her children, go out alone. Often she would only allow them out in pairs for their own safety. Little did Debbie know that this one small trip would change the lives of her entire family. 20 minutes passed, and Vicki had not returned home, so Debbie asked her 11-year-old daughter, Stephanie, to check on her. After walking several blocks, the young girl discovered her sister's pink bicycle lying on the side of the road. It was just 1 block away from her school, Homer Davis Elementary. Stephanie immediately went back to tell her mother what she'd found, and Debbie drove to the scene to pick up the bike and put it in the trunk of her car before the family began to spread out and look for Vicki. But they found no more evidence of her, so they called the police. Before long, a search was underway. Flyers were being handed out, and Vicki's family was telling the police and reporters everything they knew. As word of Vicki's disappearance traveled through the local community, witnesses began to step forward. One person recalled seeing a girl matching the 8-year-old's description with an adult woman in a nearby store. A composite sketch of the woman was made and published, but eventually, police ruled out the possibility that this sighting was connected to Vicki's case. Investigators soon caught a break when they spoke with a local teacher at the primary school who recalled seeing a suspicious-looking driver parked in the nearby alleyway. The teacher felt that the driver was loitering as he supervised a group of children playing, and soon noticed that the driver was making bizarre gestures. He subsequently took note of the license plate and handed it over to the police when he was being interviewed. Several other witnesses remembered the vehicle, a dark-colored Datsun, with one little girl stating that the driver, a man, had made an obscene gesture at her while driving by her house. Another saw the vehicle back into a telephone pole. Several others claimed to have seen a small child in that same car. Tracing the license plate, authorities wound up on the doorstep of Frank Jarvis Atwood, a 28-year-old from Los Angeles, California. He was living with his parents after being let out on parole, having spent time in prison for forcing an 8-year-old off his bicycle, pulling him onto his motorbike, and sexually abusing him. A few hours after detectives first visited the Atwood home, the 28-year-old called his parents to ask for money because his car had broken down in Kerrville, Texas. His parents subsequently notified the FBI of their son's current whereabouts, and Atwood, along with his traveling companion, James McDonald, were arrested on September 20th on suspicions of kidnapping. Atwood claimed that he'd been in Vicki's neighborhood on the day of her disappearance, noting that he'd been staying in a nearby park. He claimed that he left the area between 3 and 5 p.m., but could not account for his exact whereabouts at the time. His friend, James McDonald, agreed that they'd been in the area and stated that Atwood had left at 3 p.m. after the pair had argued. When he returned, McDonald claimed he had bloodstains on his hands and clothing. Atwood claimed that he had gotten into a fight with a drug dealer at the west end of Ena Road and stabbed him. Another acquaintance of Atwood's, who let Atwood stay in his trailer for 2 nights, backed this story up, stating that the 28-year-old had turned up with blood on his clothes and hands. Atwood had told the acquaintance that he'd stabbed a drug dealer, and the acquaintance suggested he get rid of his clothes. This clothing has never been recovered. Upon closer inspection of Atwood's vehicle, detectives noted paint flecks on the front bumper. Accident reconstruction experts matched the paint to that on Vicki's bike, while damage to the car's gravel pan was consistent with one of the bike's pedals. Furthermore, nickel plating from the car's bumper was found on Vicki's bike, and a mailbox was found to be damaged at the site where the bike had been recovered, with investigators theorizing that Vicki's bike had been struck at a slow speed by Atwood's car. Atwood maintained that he had never encountered Vicki, despite the evidence that his vehicle had connected with her bike, and in December, he pleaded not guilty to the kidnapping charges laid against him. 4 months later, on April 12, 1985, a hiker heading through the desert near Tucson discovered a small human skull. This location was around 20 miles from where Vicki's bike had been discovered. Unfortunately for detectives, the remains had been scattered, and their condition was so deteriorated that the cause of death could not be established. Dental records were used to positively identify the remains as belonging to the 8-year-old girl, and experts were able to determine that her body had been placed in the desert within 48 hours of her disappearance. On March 26, 1987, Atwood was found guilty of first-degree murder. Less than 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, but would remain on death row for several more decades. Debbie Carlson remarked, "I would have loved to have 25 more years with Vicki. In that time, Atwood's gotten a college education, written several books, gotten married, and gotten all of the medical and dental care he's needed, and we've paid for that." While in prison, Atwood earned 2 degrees and also found faith, becoming a member of the Greek Orthodox Christian Church. He has continued to maintain his innocence, and even claimed that he was framed by the police, though his appeals for a re-review of his case were denied every time. Atwood was pronounced dead at 10:16 a.m. on June 8, 2022, in Florence, Arizona, after being given the lethal injection at the age of 66. Even in his final statement, he continued to protest his innocence and made no apologies to Vicki's family, instead thanking his wife, legal team, and Jesus Christ. Vicki's case has been featured on both forensic files and the FBI files. Her mother, Debbie, became a victims' rights activist following her daughter's disappearance, helping to institute the Amber Alert system in southern Arizona in 2000. Melissa Brannen. 5-year-old Melissa Brannen was last seen on December 3, 1989, when attending a Christmas party with her mother Tammy at their apartment complex, Woodside Apartments, in Lawton, Virginia. The pair stayed and mingled with their neighbors for a few hours until around 10 p.m., when Tammy decided they should head home, but just as they were leaving, Melissa asked to go back inside and get some crisps. Her mother agreed, but never saw her daughter again. According to the Washington Post, Tammy began frantically looking around for Melissa and found a window open in a utility room, which prompted her to fear the worst and scream for help. Authorities were quick to arrive on the scene, and the subsequent search for the missing girl involved over 300 volunteers. Although no evidence of Melissa was discovered, the name of a suspect quickly emerged and reached the ears of investigators. Caleb Hughes was the 23-year-old groundskeeper at the apartment complex and had been working there for just 3 weeks. He, too, was gone at the time of Melissa's disappearance, and his name had come up thanks to several witness statements. According to numerous women at the party, Hughes had attempted to proposition them for sex, while several others observed that he seemed to pay a lot of attention to the children, including Melissa. At one point, he reportedly sat with the little girl and her mother. He bought Melissa a cupcake and told her she was pretty. Shortly after the search began for the 5-year-old, investigators visited the apartment he shared with his wife in Woodbridge, less than 10 miles from the complex. They discovered that he'd placed his entire outfit from the evening into the washing machine, and it had already been washed. Notably, this included his shoes, the soles of which had been cut off, as well as a knife sheath and his belt. Hughes's wife stated that he'd put the items there as soon as he'd gotten home. Authorities immediately took the items as evidence. Afterwards, detectives examined his red Honda Civic sedan and seized it so that it could be investigated by forensic experts. Hughes's wife, Carol, was a great help to investigators during this time. She told law enforcement that the 23-year-old had arrived home 2.5 hours late, and it was clear from his odometer that he had travelled further than normal. She had been tracking the mileage on the car and noticed that he had driven more than 50 miles that night. Hughes claimed this was because he'd decided to get a 6-pack of beer after work and then take a longer route home. However, detectives didn't believe his story because he claimed to have returned home at 12:30 a.m., but due to state regulations, liquor stores did not sell alcohol after midnight. Perhaps the most notable piece of evidence in this case was the fibers discovered in the front seat of Hughes' car. On the night of the disappearance, Melissa had been wearing a sweatshirt from JCPenney with Big Bird from Sesame Street on the front. Since they did not have Melissa's sweatshirt or her body, they decided to purchase an identical outfit and compare the fibers of the sweatshirt to those found in the vehicle. They were an exact match. Authorities also recovered rabbit hairs. Melissa's mother had been wearing a rabbit fur coat at the party, and blue fibers consistent with those from Tammy's blazer. Investigators theorized that at some point after they had gone to leave the party, Melissa was in the passenger seat of Hughes's vehicle, and the fibers and hairs had transferred over. Investigators were sure that they had their man, but although they didn't require Melissa's body to bring murder charges, they did need a murder scene, something which detectives simply didn't have. So instead of damaging the case by attempting to charge Hughes with murder, he was instead charged with kidnapping with intent to defile. The 23-year-old was convicted in March of 1991 and sentenced to 50 years behind bars. Though law enforcement believes Hughes is responsible, they still consider the case unsolved, as he has never been charged with murder, and Melissa's body remains missing to this day. 2019 marked the 30th anniversary of this case, and police made new appeals for information and began to re-examine old evidence, hoping that modern forensic techniques would allow them to finally put the case to rest. Tammy Brannen, who remarried after her daughter's disappearance, kept her old name listed in phone books in case her daughter was still alive and wished to reach out to her. She has declined over the years to have Melissa declared dead. Commenting on the 30th anniversary appeal, Tammy stated, "The Fairfax police never cease to amaze me with their dedication to this case, what they're doing and what they've done all along. They've never stopped." She added that the pain of having a missing child never goes away. Quote, "It becomes part of the fabric of your life. I miss my daughter every day. It's been 30 years, but that doesn't stop me from missing her." Police today hope that those who knew Hughes or saw something back in 1989 will feel safer speaking with them now after so much time has elapsed. Hughes had been convicted in 1987 for contributing to the delinquency of a minor after he had given a 15-year-old beer. He was also convicted of auto theft in 1986. Hughes maintained his innocence even after his conviction. Tammy recalled having spoken with him once in prison in 1991, shortly after he was convicted. She noted, "He did not deny taking my daughter, but he did not confirm it. I told him I knew he had taken my daughter. All I wanted to know is where she was. At one point I thought he was going to tell me, but he didn't." Hughes was released on parole in August 2019, having served only 29 years of his 50-year sentence. He subsequently moved to Rocky Mount in Southwest Virginia and told his new co-workers that he was a veteran whose wife had died of cancer and that he'd moved town to escape sad memories. Since nobody had any reason to doubt his story, he soon began offering his services to his colleagues as a babysitter, despite a condition of his parole being that he avoid contact with minors due to his status as a sex offender. Earlier this year, Hughes was arrested for violating his parole after a co-worker discovered his true identity. In his time out of prison, he had been able to babysit a 9-year-old boy and his 5-year-old sister on numerous occasions and had even given them gifts, which the family handed over to investigators. Hughes is set to be released from prison again in 2039, by which time he will be 73 years old. Those with information about Melissa's case can contact the Fairfax County Police Major Crimes Bureau at 703-246-7800, option 8, or alternatively, you can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.